And that is an opportunity for your property, the resale value to go up, for the rental income to increase, and all of that. So who better to tell you more about ADUs than the man himself, and that's Stan the man. Stan Acton, the founder of Acton ADU, is here, and I'd like to welcome him. Thank you, Stan, for joining us. And of course, Acton ADU is built out of based out of Campbell, and has served so many cities and jurisdictions throughout the South Bay for over 30 years now. And we're so fortunate to have Stan with us to really guide us through the ADU process. I'm sure that's on the mind of a lot of you. So over to you, Stan. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for being here. Can you all hear me in the back at all? Louder? Okay. All right. First of all, thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Niraj, for putting this together. Really great event. My name is Stanley Acton. I founded the company in 1990, and then in 2018 I created Acton ADU out of Acton Construction, and we've been doing and specializing in ADUs ever since that time. Really what I want to talk to you today about is the smart way about getting an ADU. ADUs are kind of all the rage. Most people know a lot about ADUs. I'll go over that briefly. But the thing I really want to bring to your attention is that ADUs are really, they're not well understood in terms of how exciting they are from a real estate standpoint. They're really sort of the most exciting development in real estate law in the last decades. And so once you start to understand that, then you'll probably want to know how do you go about getting an ADU. And what I want to talk to you today about is what's the smart way about going about getting an ADU. So I want to talk a little bit about what is an ADU. I'll be brief there. The requirements for getting one. Talk about why build them. Talk about some of the laws that apply to ADUs now, and then talk about the smart way to get an ADU, and then coincidentally, the smart way to get an ADU actually overlaps with how we do it. I know you'll find that shocking. So, and anyway, really, what is an ADU really? What do you have to do in order to qualify for an ADU? An ADU, by definition, is a full living unit with a kitchen, with a closet, with a bathroom, and with an area to sleep. It doesn't have to have a bedroom. It can be a studio, or it can have a bedroom. It can be up to 1,200 square feet, but it is a secondary unit on a residential piece of property. There's really different types of ADUs. Most people think of ADUs as detached ADUs, but there's also attached ADUs, a repurposed or JADU. That's where you take existing space within a residence and break the residence down and turn it into two different residences. And then there's garage conversions, where you take an existing garage or and you turn it into an ADU. I know there are going to be questions at the end of this. I will refer you back to James and Jen. Can you please wave back there? You can always take questions back there. I'll try to keep my talk today to under 8 hours because I've got a lot to say. But really, I'm not going to take a lot of questions, but that's the place to get them answered. So, what are the requirements for actually getting an ADU? It needs to be a self-contained unit. In other words, it can't share an entrance with the house. It has to be completely self-contained. JADU is an exception to that. I won't be talking about that a lot, but it really needs to be a completely self-contained unit. It has to have its own entrance. In other words, you can't enter the house and then enter the ADU. You have to enter the ADU from the outside. And it shares a lot with a single-family house. So some people have called me and said, hey, I'm buying a piece of property. We want to build the ADU first and build the house second. That really doesn't work. You really need to build the house first and then build the ADU as a secondary unit because permitting gets very difficult otherwise. It has to have all the basic amenities. We talked about that: kitchen, bathroom, closet, sleeping area. But the really key thing to understand about getting an ADU is that it varies tremendously from lot to lot, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and really, honestly, from month to month based on the rate of change of the laws. So it's very difficult for me, if anybody comes up to me and asks me, does my lot qualify for an ADU? Boy, I really need to know the lot. I need to be able to go out there, take a look at it, understand it, before I can really advise anybody with any level of confidence. So, why build an ADU? There's really a lot of reasons, but the ones we hear most frequently are to keep family close, not necessarily too close, but close. And that is mostly about elders and about kids. So we hear a lot of people investing in an ADU to be able to house their parents and keep them close and take care of them through their aging process. And then boomerang kids. Kids are graduating from college. They want to start a career here in the Bay Area. They don't necessarily have the money to buy a house, and so to put them in the backyard and give them a place to launch. Disabled and special needs families. This is a surprisingly popular reason to build an ADU. We get a lot of calls from people that have a special needs child that can be independent but not completely independent, and the ability to have them close and help them through life has been a really compelling reason to buy an ADU. Aging in place. A lot of people are building an ADU for their grandparents, and then they move into it, and the kids move into the front house. And it's really, if you think about an ADU, it's really good to think about it in sort of a 20 to 30 year time frame, because it's a long-term investment and it can have a lot of uses and it can be very flexible. And to just buy it for one short-term purpose can limit your ability to really effectively get the right ADU for you. And then, of course, long-term investment. A lot of people are wanting to rent out their ADUs or sell their ADUs or whatever, and I'll talk a little bit that in the future. But buying an ADU for an investment purpose is really a crucial reason for building an ADU. So I want to talk a little bit about the laws. Back in 2017, the governor passed some laws that empowered jurisdictions to allow ADUs. Most jurisdictions really resisted, and so over the years, the laws have gotten more and more permissive and more helpful to the consumer, and less giving local jurisdictions less and less opportunity to restrict ADUs. And so you used to have to live in your own house if you were going to rent the ADU. That's no longer a restriction. There's all sorts of liberalization laws that have occurred. One of the most recent ones, which is really exciting, is that you can now take your house and your ADU and turn it into essentially a miniature condominium association, and you can sell the ADU separately from the house. So this is a very new law. There's a lot of jurisdictions which have yet to adopt this, but it will become more and more common. So there's also laws that allow you to split the lot and build a house and an ADU on the other lot. So there are scenarios where you could take a house and actually get 4 sellable residences from that one house. So I'm not going to go into the details on that today, but it is really exciting, and it's new, and so getting permits for that and working that all through can be challenging, but it is possible. So challenges and concerns. We get a lot of people calling us that are asking about their particular challenge, their particular concern about how to go about getting an ADU. So I want to kind of go over, there's a lot of words on this slide, but I am going to take a minute to talk about it. Can I build an ADU on my lot? That's always a question. Got to look at the lot. Pretty much the answer to all of these questions are going to be determined on whether or not the lot specific requirements in the specific city is going to allow that, and that takes some research. It's not really possible for me to answer just by doing a Google search and looking at the property. What will it cost? Who do we trust? So there's a lot of players in the ADU market, Some are more experienced than others, and understanding who you can trust and who you can't trust is a concern that a lot of people call us with. Staying on budget, boy, that's a big one. The quality of the investment. You know, what does it actually mean to get an ADU? What are the different levels of quality? We've gone back and done some assessments on properties that we've finished the ADU on, and actually hired an appraiser to go in and appraise the property with and without the ADU. And in every single case, the property is worth more with the ADU on it than it actually costs to build the ADU, including design, permitting, and construction. So we've done that for about a half a dozen or so ADUs that we've completed. But without exception, San Jose, Los Gatos, Palo Alto, every place we've done it, it's come back with that result. So it's a great investment for sure. People want to know about schedule. People want to know about financing. People don't want to know about taxes. I think there's somebody in here that can help us with that. The politics play a big role in ADUs, believe it or not, because the cities that are still against ADUs still find some way to make it very difficult for consumers to get a permit. And slowly the laws are changing, which are making it a lot more and more difficult for jurisdictions to prevent that or make it difficult. But it is still quite an important factor. It's a very specialized design approach. It's not your typical design approach. You don't design an ADU like you design a house. You really benefit from somebody who has done a lot of ADU design. Permitting regulations, always really a big consideration for any ADU, and understanding them for your particular lot, your particular jurisdiction, your particular situation is crucial to success. Construction, utilities, and disruption. How long is it going to take? What's going to be the impact on my life during the time it's being built? All those are concerns. They're hard to finance, or at least they have been. That's changing. And I'll go into that in a minute, and understanding real costs up front before you get too far into it. These are all questions we get on a really regular basis. So permitting requirements. I'm not going to go through all these, but what I want you to see here is that in any jurisdiction, there are multiple people that have to sign off on any ADU application in order for you to get a permit. So it's not just the building department, it's all of these folks. And so making sure that the plans that you submit when you go to get your ADU permit are going to get signed off by all of these people. It's an arduous task. It's important to understand that any one of these people cannot sign off on it, and therefore you can't get your permit. An example is the fire department. We've had situations where we've gone in and talked to them, and everything looks good for an ADU, but we can't get it without putting sprinklers in the ADU because the fire plug, the nearest fire hydrant is too far away, and all of a sudden it adds a huge amount of cost to the ADU, and it kind of prevents that person from doing it. So it's really important to understand all of this stuff before you get too far into designing your ADU, and making sure that you can do all these things. How much does it really cost? Obviously, I can't give you a number, but the things to consider is that there's design, there's permitting, there's construction, there's landscaping, there's furnishing, there's insurance, there's taxes. It's a complicated question, and it's so easy to go online and find companies that are quoting a price for an ADU that maybe doesn't include the foundation, or maybe it doesn't include the sewer connection, or maybe it doesn't include the permit or the design. So it takes effort on your part to really understand exactly what it's going to cost you before you get too far into it. It's a complicated question. Here's a bunch of the factors that go into figuring out what it's going to cost. And these are just some of them, but we can make this available to anybody who wants it, but these are the kinds of things that you need to take into account. site, we had some really supply chain issues during COVID, and that drove the cost up really quickly, just much more quickly than we could keep up with. Permitting and fees. In San Jose as an example, if you're in one area of San Jose, the park fees are about $2,000. If you're in another area of San Jose, the park fees are about $7,000. And unless you know that, that could be a really uncomfortable surprise. So there's a lot of factors that go into what it actually costs. And it's not just the building. It's not just the quote unquote the box, right? There's a lot of factors that go into what you're actually going to have to pay. So I want to talk about the smart way to get an ADU, the way to kind of contend with all these issues that I'm talking about. Here's some red flags. These are things that, as you're exploring the idea of getting an ADU, things that you should listen for as you're talking to people. Really, an experienced ADU person is going to really benefit you. There's a lot of general contractors out there that maybe have done one or done two. That's going to add an additional challenge for that particular partner. Skipping the early risk management steps. I would say this is probably the most important thing that you can do to help you really have a successful project, and that is do a lot of work up front before you make too big of a commitment to any group. People that say you don't need permits, that's not a good idea. Too much money up front. I could spend 4 hours up here telling you about the horror stories of people paying too much up front. Unclear or incomplete plans. You have a right to know what you're buying. You have a right to know, to go through the plans and understand what it is you're buying and ask questions and get all the details before you sign a big contract. Poor communication. This is just a huge one. If you can't communicate with people on your team, you've got a very high chance of having real problems, and that can add a lot of expense to it and time to a project. No written schedule or calendar. You have a right to know what's going to happen when the foundation is going to be done, when the framing is going to be done, when the permits are going to be signed off. You have a right to know that before you engage in an expensive contract. A vague scope of work. It's amazing, some of the contracts that I've been sent from some other people that propose ADUs are like one page that say, we're going to build a bedroom, a bathroom, and a shell, and they expect to get a multi-$100,000 commitment with that kind of scope. And phrases like, it's a great deal, no problem, we can do that, it'll be easy. These are all red flags you should be listening for as you're talking to ADU vendors. So there's really sort of three ways of getting an ADU. There's kind of what we call prefab, which is where it's built in a factory, brought in with a crane, put in place. Build ready, which is, we call it build ready. Essentially, it's a set of plans that you can choose from. It's built traditionally. You can save a lot of money on design and on time if you pick an existing floor plan that's already been developed, and all you need to do is figure out where on the lot it's going to go. And then there's custom, which is anything goes. And those are sort of really the three main categories. There are subcategories in all of those. So the smart way is really take the time to define your use case. What are you going to use it for? Is it for a particular grandparent that might have a specific need? Is it for a particular child? Or is it just for rental income? If it's rental income, is it for short-term cash flow? Is it for long-term investment value? Those are very different things to consider. You want to really pay attention to your particular property. Where on the property can it go? Is it sloped? Is the drain going to be able to be connected? What are the setbacks on your property? Taking a look at your particular property is really crucial. And then figuring out who your partners are. You can't do this alone. I mean, you can, but it's going to take you probably 20 years. So really being careful about who your partners are, and then making an overall assessment of the risks, and writing those down and talking to each one of your potential partners about those risks. It really takes a team. It takes a group of people to be able to have a successful ADU project. So I'll be brief here, but I want to give you a quick overview of how we go about managing all of these complexities. We're specialists. We've been doing it for a long time. And our approach is design build. We don't do prefab. We do build ready, and we do custom. And we have a design build approach, which means that you come to us, you share your concerns, you share your needs, you share your budget, you share your schedule requirements, and then if we can help you, then we can engage in an early process that helps eliminate risk. If not, we can help you find a partner that will meet your particular needs. So this is sort of a roadmap of how we do things. The very first thing we do is what's called project validation. And this is a relatively low-cost step that is basically a risk management and collaboration step. It's $2,500, and the output of that is a complete proposal that will give you costs and give you timelines and we'll do all the research for your particular project, for your particular property to make sure it can be built. And by the time we're done with that, we're in a position to offer you a project agreement, which is a comprehensive agreement that does the design, that does the permitting, that does the interior design, that does the pre-construction, that does the construction and the permits and the sign off on the warranty. Then we create the plans, we go get the permits, and then we build the ADU. Again, project validation, it's about risk management, it's about collaborative development. By the time you're done with the project validation process, there's no obligation to go further from there, but you should have a pretty good idea about whether you want to work with us and whether this is a good project or not. Recap. The smart way to build an ADU is really consider the risks, really consider the team, really consider your use case, and then talk to several people, talk to several vendors, and make sure that you're heading down the right direction. So anyway, that's all I've got today. Thank you very much for listening. Hope this was helpful. Any questions? Jennifer and James are in the back there, and they're happy to spend as much time as you need answering questions that you might have.
Stan, thank you so much. I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
What's the minimum square footage for an ADU we need to be planning?
So the minimum square footage is really going to be determined by the jurisdiction. Different jurisdictions have different requirements. I know of jurisdictions that have a minimum of 150 square feet, and I know of jurisdictions that have a minimum of about 250 square feet. So the maximum is pretty much always 1,200 square feet. But the minimum, and I don't know what it is for Sunnyvale specifically, but it really depends on the jurisdiction.
Okay. I think we were discussing about the new law, right, about the ADU.
Yes.
So you said we can do a mini condominium units.
Yes.
Right? So if somebody gets in a 12,000 square footage lot, can they have 3 to 4 ADUs in there?
Potentially.
Right.
You know, potentially they can. It really depends on the position of the existing structure. It depends on the jurisdiction. But if you've got a 12,000 square foot lot, you can potentially split it in half. You can build another house on the other half, and then you can build a house on an ADU on each one of those properties.
So I have a question. So does that have to be like, a 6,000 square feet lot? Would that be amenable to an ADU, or I mean, does that?
So the question is if we were splitting a 12,000 square foot lot, would they each have to be 6,000?
No. Say you had a 6,000 square foot.
Yeah, it really depends on the lot. It
No
really depends on the lot. If the house is way up front and there's plenty of backyard, it's possible. But it's just impossible to give a general answer. But it's possible. Yeah.
A follow-up, like just I was discussing to one of my clients here. He was selling like I want to increase the potential value of the home selling. Right? He was telling me like, as adding an ADU brings up the value for me during a selling. What do you think about that? Like adding an ADU, but the process of ADU is like 1 year. If you're planning to sell the house in the next 2 years or so, adding the ADU will bring up the value.
Our experience to date has been that adding an ADU has always increased the value of the property more than the cost of adding the ADU. It does take about a year, but I can't say that it's always the case, but that has been our experience without exception to date.
Audience, any follow-up questions or any questions?
So I'll refer questions to James and Jennifer. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you for putting this together.